Hey there, this is Jim Donovan. Welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here. Today we have a wonderful guest, Mr. Patrick McKeown. Patrick is the president of Buteyko Professionals International and a New York Times bestselling author of the book, The Oxygen Advantage. He is a wonderful human being. He's got so much good information to share with you. This is a wonderful episode. It is packed with good information, especially if you suffer from stress or congestion problems, breathing problems, sleep apnea. There's a lot of information that you need to know. And so let's get started. Patrick, welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here. I'm really interested to hear how's it going over in Ireland today. I know that you're calling in from overseas.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Jim. All is good. I'm actually enjoying the little bit of stay at home here. It's quite busy anyway because everything is going over towards Zoom. I suppose the biggest impact is restricted travel. All the pubs are closed. And as an Irishman, you know, it doesn't do good for the Irish mentality when all of the pubs are closed. So, and with that, then I suppose the best thing to do is to turn off the radio, turn off the TV, turn off social media, turn off pretty much everything, and just surround yourself in nature, and you'll be absolutely fine.
You know, I've been finding a ton of solace just getting out into the woods, smelling the air, and leaving my phone in the car and just letting myself be. I think I maybe have taken that for granted over the years, and this year that's been a big saving grace personally. So I'm with you on that. You know, I was looking. You have so many good resources about what you do. You have this website called oxygenadvantage.com. And so as I was looking through it, I noticed right away, I got the impression that you've dedicated a lot of your life to breathing and re-educating people about how to do that. I'm interested, how did you land on this particular path?
Yeah, it was total accident. I was a mouth-breathing child growing up, and there are plenty of mouth-breathing children growing up, and nobody puts any attention to it. And this has been written about since 1909, the negative impact of mouth breathing during childhood. But mouth breathing is probably the worst thing that any child can do persistently. It affected my concentration, my sports ability, my airways, my sleep. And when I was in high school, for me to get my grades, I really had to study hard. And sometimes I lost interest in school because we know that kids who are mouth breathing, and so adults as well, if you wake up with a dry mouth, you're more likely to be snoring, but you're also more likely to have obstructive sleep apnea. And I had obstructive sleep apnea. It wasn't diagnosed. The only way I know I had it was that students used to tell me when I was staying in student dorms that they would hear me snore and then they would hear me stop breathing. But I was waking up feeling exhausted. So my asthma was getting progressively worse. And you don't just have asthma, you don't just have a breathing problem, because if your breathing is off, it can affect the mind and it can also affect your sleep. So I graduated from a university in Dublin called Trinity College. It took me a lot of work because my concentration was not good. And I remember studying, I always give this story. I was studying for an exam for 3 months and I was joined by a friend of mine. He hadn't opened the book and he asked me for my notes and I gave him my notes and he looked through my notes for 20 minutes. And the two of us went off, did the exam, and he got the same result as I did. And I couldn't help wonder how this guy has natural concentration. And my concentration was absolutely shot. I would be looking at the page, but my attention wasn't on the page because I'm stuck in my head and I don't have the energy levels to take up that information.
Yeah.
And this is where sleep is coming in. And also, if you have an agitated mind, it doesn't help. So long story short, read a newspaper article about the importance of breathing through the nose and breathing less, and did a nose unblocking exercise, simply holding the breath to open up the nose. I changed to nasal breathing. That night I taped up my mouth and I wore nasal dilators, breathe right strips on my nose to open up my nose. And I woke up the first morning, I was kind of getting used to it. Second morning, best night's sleep I had in 20 years. I knew I was onto something. My asthma symptoms reduced by 50% in the first week.
Whoa.
Now, I was trained for the corporate world. My background is economics and social science. So my background is completely so far removed from what I'm doing. And it was a couple of years later, I was driving from one part of Ireland to the other, and I just got a feeling, I said, I should be teaching, or at least I should be, more involved in this breathing because it's working, and it worked for me. So I decided to change careers, and I retrained in the field of breathing. And I have to say, I've never looked back. I found an occupation that absolutely, if anybody was to say, what's your ideal occupation that suits you? And I found it. Now, Jim, it wasn't the easiest. It wasn't an occupation that you would go into, in terms of nobody really cared about breathing 20 years ago. It was mainly in yoga, and what we do is so far different from yoga breathing. It's going a lot deeper into it, and it's looking at everyday breathing patterns. But I was lucky, and I got plenty of breaks, I have to say. And journalists wrote stories about it, word of mouth spread, and it's been great. It's provided me with a lovely occupation.
What a blessing to get to do something that rings your bell. It just lights you up.
Totally. Just know. And again, this is not touched on in schools, and it should be. Why force subjects down children's throats, and why not try and find out what exactly these kids are suited for? Because you know what? It makes life a little bit easier.
We could use more of that, right? Just
For sure.
Just a little bit of relief from the intensity.
Yeah.
I heard you say something a second ago that you taped your mouth shut.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. I think a listener hearing that would go, why would he do that?
Well, if you wake up with a dry mouth every morning, you're not likely to have a refreshing sleep, and also we have to think about mouth breathing and snoring through the mouth. For example, mouth snoring goes something like this. And there's a lot of turbulence in the throat, and the soft palates are vibrating. Now, you can still snore through your nose. However, if you tape your mouth closed, you stop mouth snoring. But it's really about getting the tongue into the roof of the mouth with the lips together, the jaws relaxed, to help open up the airway so that you've got less resistance to breathing. And this in turn then, if we look at the severity of sleep apnea, in one paper published in the Laryngoscope back just a couple of months ago, they looked at the AHI index, which is a measurement of apnea severity, and individuals with mouth breathing had 52 events per hour. Now, individuals with nose breathing, still fairly strong, but it was 27. There's still a big difference between 27 events per hour with nasal breathing versus 52 with mouth breathing. So the tape that I used simple, just medical tape at the time. Now, we've since developed our own tape, and I can show you a demonstration. How can you, for example, get the mouth closed? That's more appealing, that's easier for people. So the tape here, we have our own tape. We developed it actually for children initially, because it's so important. So it's called myotape, and it's developed for the dental industry.
Okay.
And it's developed for myofunctional therapy. But it goes like this. You've got a strip of tape, and you stretch it. So you stretch it about 30 to 40%. It covers the mouth. And hey presto. It's elasticated, so it's stimulating the muscle fibers here, the orbicular source muscle, which is surrounding the mouth, to bring the lips together, but without risk. So say, for example, if a child helping to restore nasal breathing, and we use it as a training aid for children during the day. 25 to 50% of studied children persistently mouth breathe. They're sitting watching television with the mouth open. It alters the shape of their face, and all mouth breathing children develop crooked teeth. Now, can you imagine the incidence of crooked teeth in Western society? And it's not natural for human beings to have crooked teeth. this is not primarily a genetic issue. This is not an issue that the child has inherited the big teeth from dad and the small jaws from mom.
Yeah.
The problem is that the human face is changing in size. And the issue with this is that the airway is getting smaller. So for me, like taping that my mouth that night, we have to think of what function does the mouth do in terms of breathing? And the answer is zero, none, zilch. The mouth does absolutely nothing for breathing. No animal mouth breathes with the exception of a dog. And a dog will mouth breathe to regulate body temperature. And if we were to look at any nature, if you were to go onto Natural Geographic or watch any program about animals in the wild, you will see every single one of them are nasal breathing. And our ancestors were nasal breathing. Our distant ancestors were nasal breathing. We only started mouth breathing relatively recently, probably 400 years, and probably even less.
Why is that? Why do you think it was never that way before and it all of a sudden started?
I think it's linked with diet. You know, when they looked at middle class graves in Europe who had access. You know, sugar has been around since the late the 11th century.
Sugar.
So sugar in Europe has been around for a long time. And it has to be something to do with the diets, because when they looked at the graves of upper middle class people who had access to sugar, for example, at the time, they had access to foods that the peasants, and I would have been the peasant, we didn't have access to them. But when they looked at the graves, they noticed that the skulls, the shape of the skulls, the jaws were set back. There was overcrowding of teeth. And that's from Dr. John Mew, he's an orthodontist in the UK, but he also studied anthropology. And if you look at the work then at Marianne Evans from California, Dr. Kevin Boyd, there are many dentists and orthodontists who really know this, and they know about the impact of mouth breathing on the shape of the skull. And what's more, they also will tell you that if you correct and straighten children's teeth, and if that child continues to mouth breathe, there's going to be a high chance of relapse. And it's estimated to be about 75% of children, the teeth will relapse unless nasal breathing is restored or they wear a permanent retainer. So I think there's been a number of things. Number one, breastfeeding is very important for the development of the muscles of the face, not just for nutrition. Number two, lack of awareness around tongue tie. So if the string that's holding the tongue to the floor of the mouth is too tight, difficult for the child to breastfeed, child then is introduced to the bottle. Number three, processed foods. But number four, the hardness of our food. We are eating food now that's pre-chewed. Our ancestors would be eating hard food. They would have been exercising their jaws, developing muscle tone. They weren't eating McDonald's, put it that way.
So all these different parts of the diet, from highly processed food to the sugar itself, play a part in just sort of the musculature of the face and
yes.
the tone of the muscles there. All those things play into this shape of the head and how the airways are open or not. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, it has to be that. I don't think anybody really knows. It's just one of those things. It's difficult to absolutely quantify, and there's probably a number of factors which has contributed to it. But it's the impact that food and breathing together, because mouth breathing, of course, then you're talking about nasal allergies. And you know what? It's easy to decongest the nose. 30% of the Western society has a stuffy nose. And if you hold your breath, you open up your nose. And the thing about the human nose is that the more you breathe through it, the better it works. And if I was to say in 1 minute, what are the functions? What are the benefits of the nose versus the mouth? Number one, nose breathing increases the pressure of oxygen in the blood by 10%. That's known since 1988. Number two, your nose is directly connected with the diaphragm breathing muscle. And our diaphragm breathing muscle is not just about respiration. It's also there to provide stabilization for the spine. And also, our diaphragm is connected with the emotions. Whereas mouth breathing, we're activating the upper chest and we're breathing fast and hard, and it's putting us more into a sympathetic tone or a fight or flight. The nose is protecting the airways. It's protecting both the upper airways and the lower airways. For example, people with asthma, people with exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. Another aspect is nitric oxide. We think of COVID. Well, our nose produces its own, the first line of defense is nasal breathing, and it produces a gas called nitric oxide. And when you breathe through your nose, we carry that nitric oxide to our lungs. And I've had a long day talking, by the way. It's nearly 7 p.m. and I've been talking since 9 a.m.
Oh my.
So hence my voice is giving out, and I've been doing it a few days in a row. So here's the impact of breathing as well. So, but nitric oxide is antiviral, and it's also antibacterial. So, whether it's posture, that's influenced by nasal breathing, the emotions are influenced by nasal breathing, our sleep is influenced, our oxygen uptake, but also our oxygen delivery. Because the one thing, Jim, is how often have we been told, take a deep breath? And how often have people taken this big, big breath? And all I have to say is, if you want to calm down, the worst thing that we could do is take a big, full breath, because the harder you breathe, the more your blood vessels constrict, and the less oxygen that gets delivered throughout the body, including the brain. So there's many kind of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there about breathing. And that's where my role just came into play, and as one guy said to me, Patrick, he said, they couldn't have all got it wrong. And I said back then, I actually think they did. And I'm not saying that I know it all or anything like that, but we have to look at breathing to the depth. And when we look at the application of breathing, just what we can get through the breath is amazing.
So something I heard you say, about nitric oxide. So
yes,
we know that's an antiviral. Just one thing I wanted to throw in there is that when the original SARS virus hit back in 2004, nitric oxide was actually one of the therapies that was used to help people deal with that original, what was a different coronavirus.
Yes.
And I've seen research this year that talks about how they're doing that same intervention. They've been studying it and starting to see some good results with that. So I think it's relevant to.
They're looking at it in laboratories. They showed back in 2003 that nitric oxide in laboratory setting, that it prevented the replication of the virus. And, I wrote back in March of this year, I spoke about the importance of nasal breathing. And in a way, I really wonder, why have our healthcare authorities not just emphasized washing hands, wearing masks, but why not breathe through the nose? And two reasons. Number one is, if you breathe through your nose, you take in less air. Number two, you help harness nasal nitric oxide. I'm not saying that this is going to prevent COVID,
right?
But at least it's going to offer some defense. But for people who are infected, it's a respiratory condition and breathing gets faster. The respiratory rate is one of the first things that increases when we're infected with COVID. So we know that professional golfers, there were a couple of them that were diagnosed very recently, and they recognized that they were in trouble when their whoop, so it's a band or their watch, when it registered that the respiratory rate had increased by 2 breaths, they knew that they were in trouble. So the respiratory rate increases with it. So people who are infected will feel suffocated breathing through the nose. So they switch to mouth breathing. Mouth breathing, there's a 42% greater water loss breathing out through the mouth. So you can imagine, you have somebody infected in a household. The individual is having, faster breathing. They're breathing through the mouth and they're emitting so much water vapor into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's going to increase the risk of transmission. So for people who are not infected and for people who are infected, I think nasal breathing. And like I was giving the example, I was in a tube. I have been traveling. Once I've traveled to Denmark just about 3 weeks ago. And I'm so conscious if I'm in a busy place, I will breathe through my nose, but I will also breathe hardly any air. Because if this virus is being transmitted airborne via aerosols, why not reduce the amount of air we are taking into our body, or even hold your breath if you're around people and keep some distance?
I've been doing something similar, just like if I hug even my kids, which, we're all pretty safe, but they still are out other
Of
places.
course.
If I hug them, I hold my breath. Or if I'm near somebody, just like you said, or a big one is even though I have a mask on, if I go into a public restroom, to limit the amount of air that I take in. And just understanding that we do know it's aerosol transmitted, so just minimizing that as much as possible. And what I'm hearing you say is that doing the nose breathing is definitely superior to that, in the way that it can help maybe not fully protect us, but protect us way more than mouth breathing.
Yeah, and the other thing, like there was a paper, I can send it on to you afterwards. It was published by Elsevier, and it's a journal. It's an article written by medical doctors. They spoke about getting the mouth closed during sleep, and they did actually recommend taping, because they said it may help to reduce viral load and give the immune system enough of a chance to fight this.
Well, that's good information. I would love to see that, if you wouldn't mind sending it to me.
Of course.
That would be very helpful. Now, when we're nose breathing, first of all, I just want to back up a little bit. I heard you say the common wisdom is when you're stressed out, let's take a deep breath.
Yes.
And how if we do that through the mouth, that actually helps to turn more of the sympathetic nervous system on, like it makes us more stressed.
What happens is, if we take a big breath, and the reason I say a big breath, because that's the way most people interpret a deep breath, we don't bring in any more oxygen. We don't increase the blood oxygen saturation, because our blood is already almost fully saturated at about 97, 98%.
Okay.
Breathing more air doesn't increase that, but breathing more air gets rid of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is not just a waste gas. And all it takes is one single big breath, and that can get rid of between 7 and 16 millimeters of mercury of CO2. It's a significant amount. The point here is that if we breathe too hard and we get rid of too much carbon dioxide, our blood vessels constrict. And we have 70,000 miles of blood vessels throughout the body. And not only do our blood vessels constrict, but the bond between the red blood cells, which are carrying oxygen, and oxygen increase. So in other words, the red blood cells hold on to oxygen and don't deliver it so readily to the tissues and organs when we lose carbon dioxide. And that last point, that was discovered back in 1904 by a Danish physiologist called Christian Bohr, that carbon dioxide is a catalyst. So you can imagine the red blood cells carrying oxygen, and the vast majority of oxygen in the blood is carried by hemoglobin. And hemoglobin releases oxygen in the presence of carbon dioxide. Now, on a very simple note, many people with dysfunctional breathing or faulty breathing or poor breathing, they've got cold hands and cold feet. And that indicates that they have peripheral vasoconstriction. And we can help to improve the blood circulation within about 2 to 3 minutes by not breathing more air, but by breathing less. So, like I often say, the other thing is, I'm going to talk about snoring, and then I'm going to talk about slowing down the breath and how people can experience, can they bring an increased temperature into their fingers, and can they activate the body's relaxation response with increased watery saliva in the mouth. So first of all, mouth snoring I spoke about, and we said that stops when you tape your mouth, because if your mouth is closed, you can't snore through the mouth. Nose snoring, it goes something like this. And the reason I talk about snoring is because it's so common. Nose snoring goes like this. Okay. Now, if you were to really breathe slowly And you really breathe a very soft and slow, gentle breath in, and a very relaxed and slow breath out. And now a very soft and slow, gentle breath in, and a very relaxed and a slow breath out. And as you breathe slow, can you snore through your nose? So try it there, Jim. Really breathe slowly. And as you're breathing slowly, can you snore? And you will find that as you breathe slowly, it is more difficult to snore. It's not just about the size of the airway. You know, any engineer who's looking at a pipe, they're not going to consider the diameter of the pipe in isolation. They're also going to ask the question, what is the flow? But in sleep medicine, the whole emphasis is on the airway and the diameter of the airway without considering flow. Now, if you have somebody who's got poor breathing patterns, if they're unfit, if they're anxious, if they have respiratory issues, their breathing is faster and harder. And how we breathe during the day influences how we breathe during sleep. And they have faster and harder breathing through sleep, often through an open mouth, and that's going to contribute to snoring and obstructive sleep apnea. Now, if any of your viewers want to try and improve their blood circulation, it's very simple. You could be just sitting up straight, and the whole objective is to focus on the airflow coming in and out of your nose. So you're focusing on the slightly colder air coming into the nose, and then you're having a really relaxed and slow, gentle breath out. And then when you need to breathe in, you're focusing on the cold air coming in, but gently soften the speed of air coming into the nose. So on the breath in, the objective is really slow down the speed of air coming into the nose, almost that you feel hardly any breath. And at the top of the breath, bring a total feeling of relaxation to the body, that you have a relaxed and slow, gentle breath out. And then when you need to breathe in again, take a really soft and slow breath in, almost that the fine hairs within the nostrils do not move. So your breathing now should be less than what it was before you started. And the objective is that you feel air hunger. Air hunger tells you that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. And if you continue slowing down your breathing with a feeling of air hunger for about 3 to 4 minutes, you will notice that you feel a little bit drowsy, that the saliva in the mouth is increasing, and typically the temperature of the fingers are increasing. So what I would say is, for the viewers, try that in the comfort of your own home. Try deliberately under breathing. Don't, for a few minutes, don't take so much air into your body. Really reduce the volume of air that you are breathing. Try and hide your breathing. How do you do it? Simply slow down the speed of the air coming into the nose, and you're really slowing it down almost to the point that you feel hardly any air coming into the nose. And at the top of the breath, a total feeling of relaxation to the body. And maintain that feeling of air hunger for 3 or 4 minutes and see what happens to the body physiology.
Well, that is really good. I can, even just doing it a couple times along with your demonstration, I could already start to feel that. So what I'm hearing you say is that I'm going to breathe in very slowly through the nose, barely even feeling it come in, and then exhaling very slowly. And what I was wondering is, when I get down to the part where I'm empty of air, do I sit there and wait empty for a while?
Well, just wait until you feel the need to breathe in again. However, if you've really softened and slowed down the speed of the breath in, and if you've had a very relaxed and slow breath out, then you will probably need to breathe in again, because you want to have air hunger both on the inhalation and on the exhalation.
Air hunger, yeah.
Air hunger is what we're looking for, or a slight feeling of breathlessness, or a feeling that you would like to take in more air. And the air hunger is not that blood oxygen saturation is dropped. So it's not due to a deprivation of oxygen. It's actually due to an increase of carbon dioxide. So we're purposely breathing less air to increase carbon dioxide in the blood. And as carbon dioxide increases in the blood, it improves our blood circulation. But also, the whole point about this is, I look at somebody breathing, say they have anxiety, and typically I look at their breathing. It's generally it's faster, and its upper chest. And this is feeding into their anxiety. It's not just that anxiety is going to cause fast and upper chest breathing, it does. But fast and upper chest breathing is feeding back into anxiety. So I teach the person to really slow down their breath to soften their breathing for periods of time throughout the day. And with practice, this becomes their more normal way to breathe. And they don't have air hunger. So it's almost that we are deliberately slowing down breathing so that that becomes the new way to breathe. But just before I go on, it's not just about the air hunger. We also need to teach people how to breathe low, and we teach them how to breathe slow. And for example, low breathing is about, improving the biomechanics of breathing. And then slow breathing is about slowing down the breath to a respiratory rate of between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute to stimulate the vagus nerve, to exercise baroreceptors, to improve heart rate variability, because here we can help bodily systems disturbed by stress. Heart rate variability is an amazing concept. And it's an amazing concept because it's a marker of resilience in the human being. And people who are not well, either emotionally or physically, have reduced heart rate variability. And by changing breathing, there's a number of ways of improving heart rate variability. One is nose breathing during sleep. Number 2 is that last exercise that we did. Hypercapnia increases heart rate variability. Number 3, breath holding. And number 4, slow breathing to a cadence of between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute. So when we look at the application of cadence breathing or resonant frequency breathing with nasal breathing and diaphragmatic breathing, it can really help a lot of people.
And it's built into your body.
For sure. Yeah.
That's
it.
That's the mind-blowing part of all these practices, is that you're born with them.
Yes.
I was taking a look through your materials and I saw something about how these kinds of breathing exercises can help people with weight issues. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. We can't always reproduce it. And it's something that we've seen over 20 years, that when people soften their breathing and reduce their breathing, that their appetite can reduce. Now, there's probably a number of reasons to it. I certainly think sleep is one. If we can experience deeper and restorative sleep, it has less of an impact on hormone levels. For example, individuals with obstructive sleep apnea, they've got increased hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin is a food promoter, or ghrelin switches on appetite, and leptin will switch off appetite, or at least reduce appetite. But people with obstructive sleep apnea, if they are stopping breathing during sleep, they have a much greater appetite during the day. They eat more food, they put on more weight, and as they put on more weight, it increases their risk of sleep apnea. So what we do with breathing exercises is that we change their breathing patterns to low, to slow, to light, to nasal breathing. This in turn then will reduce the risk and the severity of sleep apnea. And as a result, it's going to, reduce the negative impact that may have on hormone changes. The second aspect is that we can help to get a balance between the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And this is, improving sympathavagal tone, stimulating the vagus nerve. If we can bring the body into relaxation, we are less likely to be craving food because of stress. And it's very often that people are stressed and they use food as a comfort. So there's those two aspects. Now, you could say there's a third aspect to it. We improve breathing patterns so that it's easier for people to do physical exercise. They don't feel as breathless. And the breathlessness during physical exercise, that's influenced by everyday breathing patterns. Now, I work with elite athletes right up to, Olympians, to the very, very normal, even a 5-year-old kid. For example, we teach this to 5-year-olds, so we have our little book here, always breathe correctly, for example. So it's just like the point that, anybody can do it, but it's our breathing, it's our everyday breathing that influences our breathing during physical exercise. And a lot of people can be put off doing physical exercise because they feel too breathless.
Yeah.
So instead, what I would have them do is change their breathing during the day, breathe through the nose, slow down their breathing, and their breath hold time improves. And breath hold time is a measurement of breathlessness.
Okay.
They find it easier then to do physical exercise. They find it more enjoyable. And it's like this: if you do physical exercise, if it's more enjoyable, you're more likely to stick with it. But we do encourage only nasal breathing, Jim, especially for recreational athletes. And the recovery is much better. There's less trauma to the airways, and the benefits are just much more superior with nasal breathing than with mouth breathing.
Well, that's fascinating. Just that one tweak of doing, and you're talking nasal breathing is in through the nose and out through the nose, correct?
Yes. Yeah, because the body, if you breathe in, the body is expending energy, heat and moisture on the breath as it comes into the body. And then on the exhalation, the nose recovers that heat and moisture. Like, I know in India, say with yoga, for example, if it's a really hot environment, it may make sense to have some breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth because you can get rid of heat from the body.
Sure.
But it doesn't make sense in every environment. And again, no animal breathes in through the nose and out through the mouth. A newborn baby doesn't breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And the mouth doesn't do anything in terms of breathing. So the nose is there to recover the heat and moisture on the exhale breath. And this is what helps to keep the nose open. So it has been studied. If you got individuals to breathe in through their nose and out through the mouth, their nose is more likely to get congested. But also, the breath itself, the inhalation, is driven more by the sympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, which is a wandering nerve throughout the body. And it's sending a lot of communication from the body back to the brain. The vagus nerve steps back when we breathe in. And if we have a prolonged and slow and relaxed exhalation, we stimulate the body's relaxation response. So the main driver of the exhalation is the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, if we breathe in through the nose and if we breathe out through the mouth breathing tends to be faster, and faster breathing on the exhalation activates a stress response. So say, for example, if you think of the Wim Hof method,
yes,
it's fast breathing in and out.
Yes.
And it's the exhalation, it's the speed of the exhalation which influences whether you activate a stress response or a relaxation response. So if we think of it this way, if, for example, we are feeling stressed, and if we want to bring the body into relaxation, very simple way to do it is breathe in and out through the nose, but take a very soft breath in through the nose, and then have a really prolonged and relaxed breath out through the nose. And as we have a prolonged breath out through the nose, this information is communicated from the body back to the brain that everything is okay. And then the brain is going to work with that information and communicate back to the body. So we can almost, tap into, it's a very primitive way, because I think throughout our evolution, anytime we were stressed as human beings, we never had a slow exhalation. We always were in that fight or flight and that fast respiratory rate. And now we can use it to our benefit, that we deliberately slow down the breath to activate that relaxation response.
That is so helpful. And I love the idea that I can deliberately and consciously tell my brain that everything is okay just by deliberately slowing the breath down, even if crazy stuff is happening, right?
Yeah, of course. And, I know it's not easy. Like if people are stressed, and the last thing you probably want to do is focus on your breathing. However, the time to focus on breathing is not when the situation happens. The time to focus on breathing is now. And I can say this, 20 years on, I experience life situations. We all will experience life situations.
Right.
But the breath has been a tremendous companion, and life is a lot softer. and our reaction to situations is a lot less, and the mind activity is a lot less, and there's more space between thoughts. We're more in present moment awareness. And sometimes people think that, breathing is for tree huggers and hippies and all of this. Listen, we have SWAT, special weapons and tactics, doing this. We have Navy SEALs doing it. We have elite professional MMA fighters doing this. So we have the top of the top doing this. And why do they do it? For resilience and to handle stress. Because as one guy says, like, it's a measure of a leader is not how well that person does when things are going well. Anybody can run a company pretty much when things are going well. The company runs itself. The measure of a leader is how well does that leader perform when things are going badly. That's what a leader. The losing football team, the leader is the guy that can turn it around, that can change the mood, that they can stay focused, that they can get behind the players, that they can win the match. That's the measure of a leader. So what my thing here is, it's back to the breath and the mind. And for focus and for concentration, our breath is a companion there. And it's not just about focusing on the breath. It's also changing breathing patterns to activate different states, but also increase blood flow to the brain. If we're breathing hard and fast, and by the way, 75% of the anxiety population have dysfunctional breathing patterns. They are going to psychotherapy, they're going to psychology, they go to psychiatrist who is looking at their breathing. And it's not just about taking the deep breaths.
Right.
It's about going into a depth to improve their breathing across a biochemical point of view, a biomechanical point of view, and also resonant frequency.
Super helpful. It seems like that anyone who's getting trained to be a therapist needs to have this in their toolbox.
Oh, there's no question. Like, cognitive training is great, but
right.
Cognitive training does not change respiratory physiology. And the other thing is, like, and we had this conversation today earlier on, people who are depressed, when you talk to them, how do they feel when they wake up in the morning? They often feel that they're absolutely exhausted. Now, then we have to ask the question, what's causing what? Is it that the depression is causing the exhaustion, or is it they have sleep disorder breathing, which is causing exhaustion? They cannot function. They are more anxious, and prolonged anxiety is contributing to depression. Yeah. We know that when insomnia and obstructive sleep apnea go together, the risk of depression is higher. We cannot just look at mental health, but without looking at breathing and without looking at sleep.
And what I'm hearing you say too is that it is the consistent practice that helps us to repattern or re-educate our brain and our body into that different, just regular state of breathing.
Correct.
And so is it the fact that I just have to basically force myself to breathe slowly every time I think about it? Is that how you did it?
Well, when I was doing it, I didn't have the instruction that I had now, and I made some mistakes in the process as well. But normally when I'm working with a student, we have them, say, for example, practice slowing down their breathing to the point of air hunger. And then I asked them to do it for at least 10 minutes, four times daily. I asked them to do their physical exercise with the mouth closed. And if their nose gets stuffy, I asked them to do this exercise. Don't do it if you're pregnant or if you have any serious medical conditions. But anytime you have a stuffy nose, if you want to open it, even if you've got a head cold, take a normal breath in and out through your nose, pinch your nose with your fingers, and walk around while you hold your breath. And continue walking while holding the breath until you feel a relatively strong air hunger. And then let go, but breathe in through your nose. Breathe normally for about a half a minute and do it again. And repeat it 6 times. So the next time you feel that your nose is stuffy, you want to open up your nose, you have a head cold, and also people with COVID were doing this as well. It's slightly different. Take a normal breath in through the nose, a normal breath out through the nose, pinch the nose, hold the nose, and simply walk holding the breath. And keep holding your breath until you have a strong air hunger, and then let go and breathe in through your nose. Do that 5 or 6 times, and the nose will open up.
Well, I can't wait to try that. That's
exciting. It's been known since 1923, and we use it with kids as well. So none of this information is new.
It's not new and yet not known. And I can only postulate why.
Well, I think it's because of commercial reasons, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yes. So how does this play into, I saw you have something in your information about chronic hyperventilation system.
Yeah, so
chronic hyperventilation syndrome.
Chronic hyperventilation syndrome is just, it's a typical, it's a more common trait of dysfunctional breathing patterns.
Okay.
And chronic hyperventilation syndrome means that the person is breathing a little bit faster, a little bit harder, that they are breathing too much air. And this is causing lower carbon dioxide levels, or it causes more fluctuations in carbon dioxide. And it may be the fluctuations in carbon dioxide that's bringing on symptoms. I suppose, Jim, it's like this. If I said to you, take 5 or 10 big breaths in and out of your mouth, how does the head feel? We often feel lightheaded, we feel dizzy. So that's an exaggerated example. But how about the person who's breathing just a little bit faster and a little bit harder? Chronically, their sleep is impacted. This can affect many organs and systems to different degrees. It can affect the respiratory system. It can affect the mind. It can affect the gastrointestinal tract. It can affect exhaustion, for example. One paper, and unfortunately, breathing doesn't get a whole lot of research. The main research, though, is on heart rate variability, and that's where we can bring in what we do as well, because we know we can improve HRV.
Yes.
But one paper in Europe looked at 35 individuals with burnout syndrome, exhaustion syndrome. All 35 of them had hyperventilation syndrome. And the reason being is this: if we as human beings, we are not able to cope with long-term chronic stress, we've never had it throughout our evolution. We've never had constant stress, day in, day out, for months and months and months on end.
Right.
If we are in that situation, our breathing naturally increases, and then we habituate to that harder and faster breathing pattern. And even when the stress is removed, our breathing pattern continues. But that breathing pattern is feeding back into stress. And along history, this was first identified during the American Civil War by an American physician called the Costa. And he spoke about soldiers returning from the front line. They had symptoms of fatigue, breathlessness. We would call it post-traumatic stress disorder. And then right. I think there's no coincidence that slowing down the breathing rate to 6 breaths per minute has been shown to be effective in helping with PTSD.
And this is the thing with how intense things have been this year. It was already intense before this year, and it just seems like it's ramped up exponentially, that we are taking on new patterns, even in the breathing, that just aren't doing us any favor and actually causing us more anxiety on top of the anxiety we had, because we've habituated, as you said, to this new anxiety breath. Yeah.
I think one of the best things that I ever introduced just on a personal level was focusing on the breathing. And I understand that for people with anxiety, that if the mind is racing, it can get a little bit frustrating at the start because you're taking your attention out of the mind onto the breath. But there are different exercises. For example, I have some exercises up on YouTube that are free for people with panic disorder. Take a normal breath in and out through your nose, pinch your nose and hold your breath for 5 seconds, and then breathe normal for 10. Hold your breath for 5, breathe normal for 10, because this helps to increase blood flow and also desensitizes the body to the feeling of suffocation. But also, if we can increase blood flow to the brain, it has a calming effect on the central nervous system. So the brain and the spinal cord, they become aroused as a result of hyperventilation syndrome. But coming back to it, I think we have to be very selective about the information that we let into our minds. I, for one, I don't listen to the news, and if I do, I just listen to it by accident. I switch off media. I'm not somebody who's looking into my mobile phone very often throughout the day. We do have social media, and we use it for business, for example. And I just feel that, so much in modern society is taking our attention. And when we think of social media and technology companies, and we have to consider their modus operandi here. The modus operandi is, how do we get users to stay for as long as possible on this platform? And people are surrendering their time. They are giving 2 hours a day of their time. Many people are, to these platforms. Well, how about giving ourselves some attention? How about just taking a quiet spot, closing our eyes, or even keeping the eyes open and taking our attention out of the mind onto the breath? And doing that at different times throughout the day. It creates gaps between thoughts, and it gives us a lot of more control over the mind. Most people, they don't have control over the mind. And people might say to me, well, I have control over my mind. Well, the question then that I would ask, are you able to stop thinking? And can you switch off your mind? And for how long can you bring a space into the mind without thought? And most people will find it's maybe 1 or 2 seconds. We are living in our heads. As an educated society, we've been trained how to think. We haven't been trained how to stop thinking. We have been taught how to analyze, to decipher, to break information into tiny pieces. It's almost that we have been trained to sabotage ourselves. And I, for one, I spent 20 plus years living in my head. I would walk down a beautiful street. I could be in a beautiful scenery. I wasn't there because I was stuck in my head. And I've made a conscious effort since then of bringing my attention out of the mind into the everyday, into the present moment. And, even just bringing my attention out of my mind into my body, onto my breath. And it all goes together because the breath is the connection between the mind and the body. But the benefits that it brings for our quality of life, if somebody said to me, I'll give you a choice between a master's degree, which you've had to work very hard for, or the ability to bring stillness into your mind, I would choose the ability to bring stillness into my mind, no question, because it has done more for my life and my quality of life than any master's degree could possibly do.
And that's what it's all about. How can we, with what we've been born with, improve quality of life in a way that doesn't make us pay for it later?
Yes, for sure. It's like, I think that book, Atomic Habits, if we have a bad habit, we get self-gratification now, but we pay for it later on. And a reward, we put in the effort now, but we get the reward later on.
Yeah.
So I think you're correct.
This has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm so grateful that we even get to do it. Before I let you go here, could you tell us about your book, Oxygen Advantage?
Yeah, so I have the Oxygen Advantage is it's looking at breathing from a number of different perspectives, including performance, but sleep, asthma, childhood development, which I think for any readers, try and encourage your children to breathe through the nose. Our children's breathing program is completely free. All of the exercises are free up on YouTube for kids, because I didn't want that situation of a child, if they weren't able to afford breathing exercises. I want every child to access this. No child should persistently breathe through their mouths. For the adults, start off, make sure your mouth is closed during sleep. Wake up with a moist mouth in the morning. If nothing else, if you have your mouth dry, it impacts your dental health. You're more prone to bad breath. You're more prone to dental cavities. You're more prone to gum disease. You're even just more prone to chapped lips. So, very simple things. Breathe through the nose, gently slow down your breathing. Don't live in your head. Of course, it's a lot more than that, but it's a good place to start. So that's what the Oxygen Advantage is about. And we've got, different videos on social media. We were on Instagram, all of those things that I don't like in social media, but we're there because I suppose we use it as a means of getting the message out there.
And that's important to share what you've got, help reduce suffering. I mean, that's part of what we do here. And I can see that you're really playing a great part in that. So tell us, what's the best place or the best way to get in touch with you, where all of your information is so we can send people there?
I suppose oxygenadvantage.com is for, now it seems to be more kind of a sports oriented website, which it is. The other website for health and for focus is buteykoclinic.com. And I hope to have a new book. I've just finished writing 140,000 words.
Wow.
And,
Congratulations.
Well, as the fellow, you think you have it done, and then you hear from your editor that, you have to change this, and this. And so I'll know in time when it goes out there. But I'm looking forward to getting it out there because women's breathing is different than men. And this has been known since 1905. And how we can influence type 1 diabetes and epilepsy, functional movement, and those things that I haven't covered in the Oxygen Advantage, but that will be in the new book. So it's exciting. The application of breathing, it's quite fast.
It's very exciting. And I'll tell you what I'll be doing. I want to make sure I shine a big light on what you're doing over there. I think it's absolutely critical and important for everyone to learn. We'll be putting all of the social media channels and these websites in our show notes, as well as on the social media channels that we share this podcast on. So I tend to share things over and over again with these particular episodes. So we'll get a lot of eyes on this, and just really appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking this time to speak with my audience, and I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Listen, thanks very much, because anytime we can help drive awareness of a very simple thing, breathing, it's so simple, it's so overlooked, but it's got tremendous potential. Thanks, Jim.
That's great. And hang out for 1 second, and I'm just going to sign off here. Everybody out there listening, thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to listen in today and take impeccable care of yourself. We'll see you soon.
Well, that's it for today. I appreciate you tuning in. Remember to come see us on our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Just search Jim Donovan Sound Health.